Welcome to the Positioning Show, where we discuss topics related to the practical application of positioning for marketing, sales, and product teams. I'm April Dunford, a consultant, author, and the world's leading expert on positioning for B2B technology companies. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Positioning Show with me, April Dunford. So good to see you. I'm just kidding. I can't see you. I can't see anybody, but I am in your ears. How are you? Is everything going good? Today I want to talk about how companies can develop and communicate their point of view on a market. So here's what I mean by a point of view. In my opinion, most successful software products are opinionated. And what I mean by opinionated is they are built with a certain idea baked in of what is a good and bad way of accomplishing a certain task or doing a certain job. Most of the founders that I have worked with, if you dig back into the origin story of the product, the origin comes about that the founder was trying to get something done or had a problem or experienced somebody else having a problem and had this idea like, hey, that's a dumb way to do that. We should do this in a better way, a different way. And then they set out to solve that problem by taking this kind of different approach to it. So in my experience, most products are built originally with this baked in point of view on how a task should be accomplished or how a job should get done. Now, even though most products are built like that originally, and in most cases, if you find the founder and you go talk to the founder and the founder comes and gives you the origin story, they can tell you that story. But it's actually kind of rare to see a company, once they become a little bit more mature, do a really good job in their marketing and sales of actually communicating that point of view on the market. Now, why is that? In my opinion, there's a couple of reasons. The first reason is because we're often too busy talking about features to actually level things up a little bit and talk about our point of view on the world. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that even though the founder might have this implicit point of view that was built into the product, nobody ever sat down and crafted the story that communicated that point of view in a way that marketing could use it or sales could use it when they're interacting with customers. This concept of a point of view is sometimes kind of abstract until I give folks an example. So let me give you an example. I sat on the board of a company for a few years called Sampler. And Sampler is a good example of a company that came out of a founder's personal experience. So the founder of Sampler, Marie Chevrier Schwartz, hi Marie, if you're watching this, she right out of college got a job being a brand ambassador. And so what she did as a brand ambassador was she was one of these people that sat in the grocery store or stood on the street corner and handed you out samples of a product. So she did that. Later on, she worked at an agency that also worked on sampling programs, but traditional sampling programs work like this. And while she was being this brand ambassador, she had this kind of aha moment where she's like, how do we know this even works? Like, I'm just out here handing this thing to random people, and I don't know if they're a good fit for this product in the first place. I don't know if after I hand the thing to people, like, do they actually go and buy this thing or not? How do we really measure the results of a sampling program? And even if we did measure the results of the sampling program, like, we have no way to go back and talk to these people after they had a sample to kind of get some feedback on, like, did you like it? Did you not like it? What happened then? What was good? What was bad? So she got this idea. Maybe there's a better way to do sampling, a way to do it in a digital age where we have the power to actually do things like targeting and tracking. So the idea for Sampler was born from this experience. Sampler is a platform that allows consumer packaged goods brands to do smart digital sampling programs. So what is the value that Sampler can deliver that traditional sampling programs cannot? First of all, what Sampler does is it delivers the samples to highly targeted people, meaning It understands what the profile of the person is before it matches them with a sample to make sure that people are getting samples that they're probably going to like. And then secondly, because this is done digitally, the consumer packaged goods brands knows who's taken a sample, and it opens up this line of communication where they can actually solicit feedback and reviews from customers. The idea of what they're really doing is they're building a relationship with these customers, and they're trying to develop long-term relationships and eventually raving fans for these new products. So how would we express Sampler's point of view on the market? So first of all, Sampler believes that sampling is a really great way to get a customer engaged with a new product. However, the ultimate goal of a sampling program, when it's done the traditional way, it almost feels like the goal is to just distribute the maximum number of samples you can actually distribute. Sampler doesn't believe that. Sampler believes that the ultimate goal of a great sampling program isn't just to efficiently distribute samples. The goal is to get the samples into the hands of people that are likely to love them, and then solicit feedback and start developing a relationship with a customer that helps them turn those customers into long-term raving fans. So what happens if we don't actually know what our point of view on the market is? And this happens a lot. Like maybe the founder's not around anymore. Maybe the founder gets it, but has a really hard time expressing it. Maybe the point of view of the company has actually changed over time because they've made acquisitions, or the vision has changed, or the direction of the company has changed. So if we want to sit down and develop a point of view, how do we actually go about doing that? In my opinion, we can develop a point of view by reverse engineering it out of our differentiated value. So if you remember from a couple of episodes ago where I was talking about how to take your positioning and translate it into a great sales narrative, the starting point for that sales narrative was something I called market insight. Market insight forms the core of your point of view. Let's take Sampler as an example. The insight for Sampler is that traditional sampling programs are focused on the number of samples distributed, not the impact that those samples have on the actual business. Sampler's point of view on the market is that the value of a really great sampling program is to open up these two-way relationships between a brand and consumers so that they can get feedback and develop raging fans. This can have a much, much bigger ROI on the business than just simply distributing the maximum of samples that we can to any random person that happens to pick one up in the grocery store. Being able to articulate your point of view on a market, in my opinion, is the cornerstone of great commercial storytelling. So this combination of your insight into the market and your point of view on what a great solution to a particular problem is, these two things put together form the cornerstone of how we're going to create context around our differentiated value. This is how we help customers understand why our differentiated value matters. Companies come to me and they say, we just don't have that much that's different. Like if I look at our list of features, 99% of the stuff is the same and the 2% is actually not that big a deal. And so how do we develop this clearly differentiated point of view when what we have is just, it's kind of small. There isn't a lot for us to grab onto. And in my experience, it's interesting. Like sometimes you get markets that are really crowded. Sometimes they're fairly mature. And the differences between products are actually not that much when you think about them just as features or capabilities. But when we do the translation between the differentiated feature that we have and the value that that feature can deliver, the value is actually kind of big. And so it doesn't matter if the feature feels small to us or it felt easy to build. What matters is what is the value that people get out of that feature. That's the reason to pick you over somebody else. The features don't matter. Only the value that the features deliver matters to your customers. Our sales pitch, our story, our point of view is all about contextualizing our differentiation so that customers understand the impact of that and the value that it can drive for their business. Let me give you an example. This is a long time ago. I was working at IBM and I was in the database division and I was responsible for marketing a database. Now, listen, even back then, databases were commodity. Like these things, databases have been around a long time, like 20 years, 30 years. I don't even know how long. So long, it doesn't even matter how long they've been around. Commodity. They all look the same. If I was to do a feature function checklist between my database and my biggest competitor at the time, who was Oracle, same stuff. Like there's literally nothing different about these databases. Databases, pick one, pick the other one. It really doesn't matter. So how do I go about developing a point of view around this thing when basically I got a product that looks exactly like my competitor's product? Here's the thing. They weren't exactly the same. There were differences. The differences just didn't seem like they were all that big on the surface. So if you looked at our database versus Oracle's database, the big difference was that we had better connectors to other things. So if you wanted to use our database with anybody's application, it was kind of easy to connect it and make that happen. If you wanted to get data in or out of our database, that was actually a lot easier than it was with the Oracle database. Oracle, on the other hand, generally was selling the database bundled with their own applications. So what they really wanted you to do was buy the whole stack. With us, we were kind of into mix and match stuff. So we had this idea that our database was going to fit in with a lot of other stuff happening inside your IT stack. So that's our differentiator. Now, what's the value of that? The value of that was that you could actually have a lot more flexibility in swapping out all the little piece parts around the database. And you might say, well, okay, what's the value of that? Well, the value of that is, the minute something new comes up, you can actually react to that kind of fast. You wouldn't have to go back to the drawing board. You wouldn't have to throw out the whole stack. You could just swap things in and swap things out. It made you a lot more agile. For a big Fortune 500 company, which were the companies we were selling to, that's all about innovation. Something new pops up. You want to try it out? No problem. Swap it in, swap it out. So over on the Oracle side of things, if you asked Oracle, well, what was the value of having everything all nicely integrated and kind of a little bit more closed and less open, they'd say, well, there's value in that too. The value in that too is, there's not as much work to get everything integrated because it's all one stack. It's all one big solution. It all comes from one vendor. So faster time to value, faster deployment. On our side, the value was all around innovation, being able to have more flexibility, swap things in and out, being more agile in the market. So when it came to expressing our point of view on the market, our point of view was all around openness for the sake of innovation. The reason you wanted to pick our stuff is because we had this deep, deep commitment to openness. So we sat in the standards bodies. We appreciated open standards. We did a lot of stuff with the open source community. We were all about openness. Like a database was just a piece of your stack, and that piece should play nice with all kinds of things now and in the future. That was our point of view on the market. If you went to Oracle, Oracle was different. Oracle's point of view on the market was a little bit different. It was all about efficiency and getting things in fast. And it's interesting. Our point of view appealed to the customers that we were trying to sell to, which were the biggest of the big, great, big, giant Fortune 500 companies. Oracle at the time was selling a little bit below that. So companies that, they appreciated innovation and things like that, but they didn't have the biggest budgets in the world. They were a little bit more budget conscious, and they appreciated the idea that this thing was maybe a little bit more efficient, faster to deploy, maybe a little bit cheaper to get it stood up and running. So even though the feature function differentiation between the two things seemed like it was hardly anything, we actually had very dramatically different points of view about the market And if you sat in a sales call with us, that sales call sounded very, very different than it sounded if you sat in on a sales call with Oracle. In my opinion, this is the power of a point of view. The point of view is all about giving context for these things that are just little features that on the surface of it might not seem like a big deal. But if I can put it in context and make customers understand why these things are actually super, super important for their business, that's a reason to pick me over the other guys. So let's think a little bit about how we use point of view in sales and marketing. So rolling back again, a couple episodes ago when I'm talking about how we're building a sales pitch, a point of view is kind of a thought line that weaves its way through your sales pitch. So it starts with your insight into the market, and then you move into, well, how are we different than everyone else? And therefore, what do we think is really important for a customer to consider when they're making a purchase decision? When you switch in your sales pitch from talking about the market to talking about yourself, your point of view is the context through line that runs through your story about here's what we built, and importantly, here's why we built it. If you can really nail that, I think that's the key to having a sales pitch that is just ho-hum, feature function, tick the boxes. Even a sales pitch that's a level above that where you're actually talking about value. If you can really nail this point of view thing, you got a thing that can really capture the imagination of a buyer. And not only that, if you're great at articulating that and communicating that to the champion inside a B2B account, what you're actually doing is you're arming that champion to be able to then go and communicate that point of view to all the other stakeholders, up to the economic buyer, across to all the other stakeholders, maybe end users, maybe legal, maybe IT, maybe purchasing, all these other people that really need to understand why would we pick these guys versus the other guys. Point of view is a good way to package that up and bring the value of that really high level. We're not talking about features, functions here, and put it together in a story that is easy to tell, easy to remember, easy to communicate across an account. So I hope that's helpful. It's kind of an advanced concept, this concept of a point of view, but I think it's one of these things that you can get better at the more you fool around with it with your own products. So I would love to hear your feedback on this one. So, if you've worked on having a point of view or you have examples of folks that you think have a great point of view in the market, I'd like to hear about it. And that's all I got for you today. You know what? This podcast is still pretty new, and I would love it if you left me a review or gave it a rating. People have left me a lot of reviews already, and I super appreciate every single one. Last week I was on vacation. I came back. I got COVID, and so I spent 2 days in bed, and it was terrible. Actually, I was super sick. But I was reading reviews of people on the podcast, and I was like, man, you people, you're so nice. I appreciate you so much. Anyways, I'm glad folks are enjoying this. Let me know what your feedback is, and I will see you next week. Thanks.